Tonight's program, we really just wanted to talk about the different things that we need to consider for fall here in Texas and moving into winter. And it's not the same as it is all over the country. If you belong to any other Facebook groups or any of the other ways of seeing things across the country, people are, talking about their freezing temperatures, etc. And not that we don't get that, but it's really not quite the same here in Texas as it is, say, in Michigan, where I tried to learn a little bit about water gardening while I worked there. So, we want to talk tonight a little bit about the cooler seasons here in Texas and what that means for our water gardens. And it looks like we have a pretty seasoned group here tonight. So we may move through some of this fairly quickly, but please stop. This is for you. We want you to ask questions, really want your input and suggestions. So really, let's just have a conversation here tonight about what it means for fall and winter in the Texas water garden. Um, First of all, feeding our koi. We do need to switch to a fall food, and that's wheat germ based typically. Lisa, Kimberly, what do you all use? Do you have a particular brand you like in the fall or cooler months?
You know what, Rebecca, and what I've learned from our English friends across the pond, so to speak, is because I always change the food. So I have used all vegetable based food in the fall and going into winter. But what I have learned is that I don't have to switch the food, but I really do need to slow down how much I feed.
Okay.
And the same is applicable for, and so what I'm saying is not the gospel, it's just what works for me, guys. But I do not only belong to our club and Dallas Koikichi, I also belong to KOI, which is an international club, all across the globe. What I have found during the summer, so the last 2 months, not only have I not been outside doing anything in my garden because it was too bleeping hot, I stopped feeding my koi. I normally feed, let me rephrase that. I didn't stop feeding my koi. I only fed my koi once a day versus I have always fed them twice a day, just like I feed my dogs. So the big pond, I only fed in the morning for the last 2 months. And the reason for that is that the water was so stinking hot. So much was going in the skimmer and the fish were struggling, the filters were struggling, everything was struggling. So just being aware of what's going on in your pond.
My fish didn't struggle, and actually my filter didn't seem to struggle, but I talked to you, I talked to Kevin, I talked to a few other people and realized that it's just as important to look at those overly warm temperatures as it is the cold ones.
Well, and I didn't mean to go there, but we've got, but it's Texas style, right? So we've gone from, just as an example, from me feeding 1 time a day to me feeding 1 time a day, but for different reasons. One, because it is too bleeping hot. Two, I got in that pond on Sunday and I was glad I had my waders on. That was really cold. And I had my a long sleeve t-shirt on because I was really chilled. And my water temperature has been like well into the high 80s for 2 months. And now it's like it's just dropping like it's hot, as they say.
Well, I was
Well,
hesitant to say
my
anything.
fish certainly notice it. I'm seeing a whole lot more activity, a whole lot more movement when I go out there to feed. Um, so it's almost like spring when they're first kind of waking up. They're really excited. They're really interested in food right now. And, I know that it's kind of a brief period here before I taper off on the too cool side.
And I agree with you, Rebecca. Mine are like, hey, it's spring break out there right now.
Right.
Not only do I have the extra puppies in the garden that are very interested in the fish, but the fish are pretty interested. So I have fed them a couple of times a day for the last 4 or 5 days, and will continue that probably until my water temperatures drop significantly, and then I'll back it off to 1, and then I'll back it off to 0. And I think Kimberly was going to add something about her pond.
I was just been feeding once a day when it was really, really hot. But then when we'd have a cloudy day or a day that it rained, then I'd feed them in the evening, just not as much as usual. But
Yeah.
I've gone back to twice a day now. As far as fall food, I hesitated to say anything because I don't change either. When I first got my pond, I did that, and I used some of the more expensive where they had spring, summer, fall, and all that. And food got so expensive, and the places that we bought it here sort of got fewer and fewer. So now
they kind of went away.
Yeah. So I just, like you said, as far as temperatures going up and down, I just change the amount that I feed. And that's it. The only thing in the winter, if we've quit feeding because it's really, really cold, and then we get some nice warm days, I'll steal some of Ed's Cheerios out of the cabinet and give him a little bit of that, during a warm day. That's about the only
and Kimberly, I've heard a lot about Cheerios. So like with the Dallas Koi Kichi people, like the little treat or the cookie for koi is Cheerios. Did you do any research on why Cheerios are kind of okay to give to your koi?
Yeah, they say as long as you have, as long as it's not the frosted and with a lot of sugar in it, but it's much lighter. It's kind of like having a wheat germ or something, just
Yeah.
doesn't have any protein to it. So that's the only reason I fall back on those.
Well, and then also, so to go back to what Rebecca was, I think, kind of leading to with the food chain change was it doesn't have protein in it, right? So
Right.
why don't we want to get protein in the winter or the fall?
It's really hard for them to digest. And their
just like it is us, right?
Really slows down.
Exactly. Does anybody out there in the audience have another experience that they want to share with the group?
I do. I've been taking my cues from the fish, right? So I always knew about the low temperature guideline, but really I never had known about the not above 90-degree thing, right? So if I go out there, even when I was going out there when it was 90, if I turn off the waterfall for a few minutes, which is their cue that, hey, you're going to get fed. If they don't come up, I don't put not even one food in there, because they're hanging down low where the water's cooler. They're not into eating. So I'm taking all of my cues from them. If they're not coming up, I'm not feeding.
That's a good read, Lori. Very good read.
But when the temperature cooled off, man, I'd turn off the waterfall. It was like, bang, bango, we're ready.
Yeah.
Ready to
exactly.
chow
But
down.
same thing in the winter, right? When they're like fins clamped down at the bottom of the pond, and like you're not gonna throw food in the top of the water if they're not like kind of acting like they're interested. They're like,
yeah,
they're chilling,
exactly.
they're Netflixing and chilling. Don't throw food in there. You're gonna like screw up your filter.
Yeah, if they don't come up, I don't put any food in there.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, if my dogs were like on the couch and I'm like rattling the treat jar and they don't even look up, I'm not bringing a treat to their butts, their lazy butts. You know, they're just not interested. You know, they want to watch TV or whatever they want to do.
Well, I think my koi are more like your dogs. I've never seen a day, no matter how hot or how cool, that they aren't interested. So I do try, and it interestingly enough, I switched to my winter food here in the hot summer months just to take it to the more whey base, the more, you know, plantable material based instead of the protein, animal protein based kind of thing. And I didn't feed a lot during the hot weather, but I used my fall food even here in the hot summer.
I think that's a good idea. You know, I like that idea, Rebecca, truly. Or Becky,
Well,
as
and
people
mine-
call you
mine
on
like I
Facebook.
said, they want to eat all the time, no matter what the temperature is. So I tried
Yeah.
to be aware of the guidelines they should be following if they weren't
Yeah.
finned pigs.
Well, and the whole thing is, you know, we don't want to give them protein or something hard to digest. And then they get super cold and their metabolism shuts down and they kind of go into that hibernation mode. And then that food that didn't come out of their body just putrefies in there. So
Right.
that's why we have to be so careful. So
So the point
I
where
know,
we
Rebecca,
really-
you have horses, right?
I do.
Does anybody else have horses?
Not
Take
anymore.
yourself off mute. Kimberly did. Anybody else?
I use Microblift summer staple in the summertime, and then when it gets really hot, I switch over to the fall and winter food.
Mhm.
And in the process of transitioning, I mix it about half and half.
Oh,
I
just
only
like you
feed
would a dog.
Yeah, I
Perfect.
only feed them once a day. If I go out there in the morning and to their normal feeding spot, they don't even bother coming over. But in the afternoon, when I walk by there, here they come.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, that
Makes sense,
and
Mark.
that's what like Lori was saying is if they're not interested, don't do it. If they
Yeah.
are, consider
Don't-
it.
Yeah, don't just toss the food. But the point I wanted to make with the horses is that, you know, their guts are so sensitive. And they get colic, and colic creates like death in a horse.
Yes, yes.
and
it's-
that-
it's
I-
a thing.
When a horse dies on you, that's a really big animal to have to take care of. A
Ma'am,
lot
it
of our
is.
koi are really big fish, and if you overload their guts with stuff that they can't digest because they're going into a cold snap or something like that, you've really done irreparable harm to them. So just be conscious of that. And then let's go to that next topic, Rebecca. No feeding. When do we do that?
I've heard different things, so I kind of want to poll from folks here, but I've heard below 50 degrees. I've heard below 40 degrees. Again, I kind of watch my fish. Again, we're not talking air temperature, we're talking water temperature.
Like with a thermometer, not sticking
Yes,
your finger in
absolutely.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And my fish are still pretty active when the water's 50 degrees. It's somewhere between there and 40 that I quit feeding. But
I think you have kind
I
of
know
a
people-
unique ecosystem there, Rebecca. You're in a kind of a little weird area.
I am.
Yeah.
So,
So, but I
think it's
appreciate
important to
that,
watch-
you know, you and
it's
Lori,
important to watch your
and
fish.
some of us are just watching our fish and reading. We're reading the room.
Yeah.
So I'm the same way. So, you know, depending on what audience I'm in front of, yeah, cut it off at 50. But you know what? If those fish are coming up and begging for food, I'm giving them something. I'm not going to
Yeah.
give them a whole scoop.
Not as much.
Yeah. I'm just going to pull back on it. Same thing with the dogs, same thing with the birds, same thing with me.
Rebecca, how deep is your pond out there?
It's 5 foot at some points.
Yeah. See, mine is 3 feet. And even when the temperature varied, when it was really hot, I mean, my fish were hanging down at the bottom because I'm sure it was cooler down there under the fish caves.
Right. It
You know,
was.
I don't have 5 feet of depth. So my temperature changes a lot more than yours.
Absolutely.
Well,
And
I
same
mean,
thing in the
honestly,
winter, Lori. Same
but
thing in
I
the
will
winter.
tell you, I will tell you just from personal experience of getting into my pond, if I am getting in and that top layer where the lily shells are is not so bad, but even this summer, it's a bit of a shock to go down into that 5 foot level where it's a bit colder. So in the summer, it stays colder. In the winter, it stays warmer. That extra bit of depth makes a huge difference for the fish either way.
Yeah, I knew why my fish were staying down low. There wasn't any doubt in my mind. It's like, yeah, you're down there in the shade where it's friggin' cooler. It's friggin' hot up here.
Right. But yeah, if they come up, to me, that's a sign that they're okay with where their body temperatures are, etc., because they are a cold-blooded animal. If they're not okay with it, they're not going to come up and they're not going to want food. If they do, like I think it was Kimberly said, I'm going to give them a little, but maybe not a lot since I know it's not good for them. But, I really do, judge the room, see what they're interested in. But I do at times of either extreme, cold or hot, tend to go more to the wheat germ based food. And I do order it online. I find Webb's has a good selection of stuff that's wheat germ based for those hotter and colder months. But, below about 40 degrees water temperature, I don't feed at all. And even when they tell me I'm mean and they come up and look at me with sad puppy eyes. And yes, fish can look at you with the same puppy eyes because
They definitely do. You know
they
what?
look at you like you're just evil for not feeding them at that
Yeah.
point.
I have mine come up surface, when it's below 50 and they're asking for that. And that might be the case for that day, but I know Mama knows best. I know it's going to be super cold tomorrow and for the next week. And that's kind of what I'm looking at, not just what their behavior is that day. I'm concerned about what the weather forecast is, and are they going to be able to digest this and get it out? Because I don't want to lose anybody. We've all lost fish for whatever reason. Most of us don't want to do that.
Okay, so
They
kind of
get
moving
big
on.
like a Yorkie or something. You're too big to bury.
Yeah. So kind of moving on, just other things like water quality considerations. How long do we, add the regular beneficial bacteria? I know there's cold water versions, but I'm more worried about adding it in the summer when my water clarity isn't great. And I need to make sure that beneficial bacteria is helping me, keep all the bad stuff down. So, how long do you guys add the beneficial bacteria?
I kind of stop adding that once I stop feeding.
So you tie it to the feeding.
Yeah.
How
For me, I get a break. If I stop feeding, I stop doing some of that other stuff. I'm still cleaning filters and junk. But I'm not doing it as often because I don't have to, because there's no food. There's not a bunch of poo-poo going in there. But that's me. Bacteria, there's a point in the pond that you stop adding beneficial bacteria because your filter is full of that stuff. Right. It should be good. Maybe you're just dosing it every now and then.
I really only add it in the spring. The rest of the time, I think my pond is established enough. It holds it pretty well. It just, and with all my
I think you're right on yours, Kimberly. How long have you had that pond?
Oh,
I know you've adjusted it,
Yeah.
a number of times, but
I'm trying to think. In its present configuration, about 10 years, I guess.
okay.
The bog helps a lot too,
Yeah.
having plants.
So you guys, for those of you that don't know, Kimberly's pond, not only is it established, her business, her company business is water filtration. So she's got, the most amazing water filtration compared to a lot of us. And tell people a little bit about briefly what your company does, Kimberly.
Well, we make water purification systems for the military, mostly special forces. And so, we make our own filters as far as, and we don't use drops, chlorine drops. We make filters that attach to our hose when we put water in, and we just run it through that. And so lately in the summer, when it's really hot enough that we're getting a lot of evaporation, I just have the water on drip, drip, drip all day long. So it helps, makes the life a lot
And
easier.
we have our filters on it too.
That's what I just said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Step into the video, Ed. I don't want to see your arm. I want to see your face, please.
Oh.
Get down there by Kimberly. Hi, Ed.
Hello.
Is
Okay.
our mortgage fixed?
What,
What rate is our mortgage? Fixed.
on the other house?
on the
Yeah.
other house?
Yeah, it's fixed.
What, what is it?
Never mind. We'll talk about it later. It's
Well, anyway, she's
I mean-
she's got some superpowers over there. Is why I wanted her to share that with you guys.
So
Yeah.
I'm probably the outlier. I want to tell you what I figured out last year after this newer pond. The city of Dallas, I'm in Carrollton, but Carrollton gets our water supply from the city of Dallas. And when you test the phosphate level of the water coming out of the tap in Carrollton and in Dallas, it is extremely high. Like it's off the top of the charts. So since my pond has an autofiller, I spent the whole first, 6 or 9 months trying to figure out what the heck was going on. So even during the winter, I was putting in the cold water beneficial bacteria to fight the algae caused by the phosphate level. So now the only time my phosphate level kind of creeps up is like when it was this summer and 103 and the evaporation was going on and the autofiller was adding water. I noticed that the phosphate levels were creeping up because it's the clean water causing the phosphate levels to creep. And I've got the freaking barley bale in there. And, I'm just trying to stay on top of all of those things to deal with the algae growth. And because as water gets automatically added, my phosphate levels go up. So yeah, I
that's
bought the
interesting.
winter.
That's interesting, Lori. All the pond kits I've ever received, the phosphate drops, I just toss to the side. I've never ever tested for phosphate. So
I know.
like when
I've
you
heard that
brought
from other
up,
people.
I'm like texting Kevin going, what
I know.
So it's something I've started paying more attention to, but I've never tested for it.
Believe me,
So-
I got the city of Carrollton freaking water guy out here.
I bet you've
Dogged
tweaked
it.
some
Well, he told me, he said the government, nationally, no water treatment
no one
plants
cares.
require you to test for this. And of course,
Yeah.
phosphates come from people fertilizing their yard, and it's in the runoff water. And number one, if they don't test for it, then they don't treat for it. There's no requirement to treat for it. And I
Right.
showed him my test kit, and he said, well, that's the same test kit manufacturer that we use for the other things. So it's probably a good test kit. And I'm like,
You think?
well, yeah. So my water is dark royal blue. I mean, you can't even, you do the testing and then you hold the thing and you hold it next to the paper colored chart and you try to see where it's going to line up. And I can't see through the water tube. I mean, it's so dark. So, yeah. I
So
even-
it's lit up. Interesting.
Oh God, it's off the chart.
Yeah.
So I constantly keep an eye on that. But yes, I do use, so therefore, I continue to treat, I continue to test and I watch for when it comes up. And if it's not evaporating, then there's no water adding. So the phosphate level is not high. But all during that 103-degree temperature, man, my thing was adding water. And so I was testing. And so, yes, in the summer, I was adding beneficial bacteria. In the winter, I was adding the cold water beneficial bacteria. I put in the barley bale. I mean, I was doing everything. I mean,
Well, I'm thinking, Lori, that this might be a really good education piece for our newsletter because I know nobody else has covered this. So
well, I called a friend, a woman.
I'm gonna pair you with Lori Pacetto.
Okay.
To develop a piece for that. Like
it's weird as
like
hell. It's
how
weird
it
as
affects
hell.
the fish and the water and all that.
Because I called, there's a woman that I know who lives just north of me, and she's had a pond for some time. And the first thing I did was call her and say, Linda, are you testing the phosphates? Because, I'd heard from her raccoon problem and, she's had other animal predation and things. I'm like, have you tested? Because I wanted to know if I was trying to figure out if my test kit was had gotten hot or was something wrong with my test kit. I mean, what the heck, And she said, no, I never test for phosphate. I'm like, okay. So, yeah.
What's the negative on the phosphate, Lori? What's the problem if it's high?
It is the active ingredient in fertilizers. So you will grow stuff in your pond that you do not want to grow, like algae.
Oh, like algae, yeah.
Yeah, I was like having algae out the wazoo. I'm like, what the hell? What is going on with this algae thing? And then I tested, because everything else was good. No ammonia, nitrites, all that stuff was good. And then phosphate, it was like off the chart. I go, well, that's why I'm growing algae. I can grow anything. I can.
And that's the part of the test kit. I swear to God, I've been told by like 9 people, just throw that drop away.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you test it and but I mean, I'm telling you, Carrollton gets our water from the Dallas water supply. I mean, I'm up here in Northwest Dallas, so I'm getting mine. Our water in Carrollton comes from the Elm Fork of the Trinity River. There's a water treatment system that we pull our water from. So I don't know if it's all the Dallas County water treatment systems or not, but holy crap, you think your test kit is blasted because it's so high. You think it's just not reading correctly.
Well, again, I want you to write an article because this is a good subject, but let's move on to because we've got we've got a lot more to cover.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, one of the things about cooler weather is water holds more oxygen when it's cool. So this is the better time to do things like cleaning your waterfalls and anything that will muck it up. I mean, that was the way my husband
because it won't affect it as much. It won't have the impact.
It's not going to be the negative impact to your fish that it would be if you did it in the middle of the summer.
So as an example, I can turn my waterfall off for 3 or 4 days because I've got little oxygenators in the pond personally, or even if I didn't have those. And then when all that junk dries up off there, I can just kind of scrub it out and take it away.
Right. Or for me, I just get in there, I start to clean up my waterfall, and it's like just this nasty mud stuff flows into my pond, and it's, that would be
in the summer, that's crappy. Yeah, because it just makes more of that crap.
Well,
but
you guys all have skimmers though, correct?
Wait. Say it again, Lewis.
You said you guys are all using a skimmer. You guys don't have a bottom drain. Is that correct?
I've got both.
I've got both.
I have
I'm
a
just
skimmer.
wondering how the difference in the impact is because I don't have a skimmer. I only have the bottom drain. And and that's where it pulls everything from.
I
And
think
so
you're gonna
it seems
suck
like,
it out faster.
well, it
Yeah,
seems
I
like
mean-
it sucks it out faster, but it also just doesn't settle.
Hmm.
I'd say the bottom drain takes care of probably 75% of mine. So, but the thing is, when you muck up the waterfall, or I have a fairly long stream / high pond. Yeah, it's not a pond. It's a roundish part of my stream above the first waterfall before it
It's a
goes
bog,
into it's a
like a
bog.
mini bog. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a very mini bog, but it still gets all ucky. Great term, term there, technical term. But when I clean that out, it just dumps this crap into my pond. And so, it's that I don't like to do in the summer when it's really hot, because it really messes up the entire water chemistry and everything for a bit. But it can recover from that better either in the early fall or the early spring. And the spring I'm out there doing more with it, and I want it to be clear, and I'm working hard to get it clear. In the fall, if it's ucky for a few days, I don't care so much. But it's also time where it doesn't seem to impact any of the rest of the ecology of the pond as much.
I think that's a good observation, Rebecca. Like, do it when things are kind of screwed up anyway. Like when things are
Yeah.
changing and shifting anyway, it's just a little extra shift versus stirring the pot when it's already like vigorously boiling, like
Right.
the
Yeah,
last
you
2 months.
really don't want to do that in the
Yeah.
middle of the summer, because it's
Yeah.
going to cause health issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to
Well-
time it with trimming up some of the plants going into winter and, do all that at the same time when it's cooler.
That's
Yeah.
what I was going to say, Kimberly. I'm getting ready to do more of a vigorous cleaning before the winter, because I don't want them to be in there with whatever has managed to settle into the bottom. I do have a skimmer, and I did get rid of the crepe myrtle that was over my pond. So I don't have a lot of stuff that accumulates. But when you look down there, I can't really see those rocks on the bottom. So I think, okay, well, I need to get the pond vacuum out and just do a little cleaning before the winter,
Yeah.
so
You
they're
don't,
okay.
you don't want that turning into like yucky mulm.
Gunk, no.
Yeah. That's like causing the anaerobic stuff. So
Right. So
Um,
a little clean out now is what I'm going to do when the weather is not really hot and not really cold, and early enough that by the time they do get stasis, it's all okay by that time.
good idea.
Yeah, good idea. So
What about winter
can-
projects, Rebecca?
yeah, moving on to those. Well, obviously it's cooler then to do the digging and some of those heavier labor type things you want to do around your pond, whether it's actually in the pond or around the pond. But as you go into that cooler weather and these great projects, I think back to a few of the discussions we had in the past. Well, actually, it was last fall when we talked about neat projects around the garden. Things that involve concrete. You need to do them before you get too far down in the temperature range. Concrete sets best over 70 degrees, but it can do pretty well down to about 65.
And you're
You're
talking
down
air
below-
temperature in this case.
Yes, air temperature in that case.
Okay.
You go much below that and your concrete doesn't set as well. And it tends to be more brittle and just everything like that. So your concrete projects, whether it's the beautiful dragonfly project that Lisa did, or the stepping stones that Kimberly's done, or the pot things that Kevin made, all those are better to do here, either in your early fall or your spring.
After you volunteer at the Texas Discovery Garden.
Right.
just
yeah.
saying.
So
Sorry.
Yeah, just and I know it's hard, and I know it's terrible in my life to stop and think I have to plan one of my building projects around the temperature because we live in Texas. That can be anything on any given week, basically. But you really, if you're going to do one of these big concrete projects, you want it to be in the optimal range. So think about that as you're doing your planning, whether it's completely decorative or when it's, some of the other things.
If it's gonna be supportive of anything, like a structure,
Oh,
like it's
absolutely.
way more important. If it's just decorative, it can crumble, who cares? You care because it's art, but
I care, Lisa or Kimberly, because you guys do these things more naturally. It's a struggle for me. I look at you guys and I'm in envy of the beautiful things you've done. But that's hard work for me to be that creative. So,
well, and I don't mean to discount that, but it's like if it's structural, I don't want
structure is
anybody
way
like
more
screwing up and like they built something and they built it at the wrong temperature. They're in a hurry to get it done. And then it crumbles under their feet as they're sitting over the water, or
absolutely.
like it hits their baby kitten or, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I mean. That's what I
Yeah.
meant by that. So
So
not to negate anybody's effort.
Yeah. So as Lisa effectively moves us on, talking to just some of the general things about the garden. Right now is a huge time for harvesting seeds. Until a couple of years ago and getting really into the water gardening piece, I never realized how much I could do in the fall by harvesting seeds from many of my plants. And I mean, the two obvious ones for me are I have some beautiful, beautiful zinnias that are a hot pink, and they grow really tall and really beautiful. And I started with one package a few years ago, and it's now everywhere in my garden. And it's because I'm harvesting the seeds in the fall. I'm spreading them, and they're coming back gangbusters the
What
next
plant
year.
was that, Rebecca?
It is a zinnia, a hot
A
pink.
zinnia. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I'm happy to share bright pink zinnia seeds with anybody who wants them. Just contact me.
My annual zinnias are like I planted a multi-pack out front and they were really late coming out this year. And Rusty over at North Haven Garden says, Lisa, they're gonna suck, like you're too late. I said, well, there's like nothing available until like it was freaking mid-May. And anyway, I've got pink, white, gold, rust, like a whole mixture, and the pinks are flipping huge. So
Yep.
huge.
Yep.
So I like the dark pink and the white. I've had white zinnias annuals come back 3 years in a row.
Right. And it's not that they're coming
without
back
doing
from the
anything.
plant.
Like
It's not they're coming back from the plant. They're coming back from seeding.
From the seed. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I'm finding is I'm taking the seed heads off those zinnias and I'm spreading them, and you can spread them now in the fall and they'll come back in the spring, or you can spread them in the spring and they'll come back. It just doesn't matter. But I found that harvesting those seeds makes a big difference. I'm also harvesting seeds now on a lot of other things. My perennial hibiscus. And oh my goodness, I started doing that in the last year and then planting them in the spring. And I have a ton of perennial hibiscus if anybody wants those.
Texas star hibiscus.
Yes.
Absolutely. Grab those seeds.
I've got white and red. The other thing would be coneflower. or
I have
echinacea.
white too.
Yeah, coneflower, it's another great one. I didn't believe it the first year. I thought, oh, I reseeded from my coneflower and it didn't do much. It was spindly and it was ugly. And then it came back gangbusters the next year, and I got to reading that that one takes 2 years to establish.
Oh, wait. Let me give you the little, I don't
The
know if it's
poem.
a poem or whatever it is, but with perennials, Laura, you know what this is. Tell them what it is.
It's like,
First year, they sleep.
yeah.
Second
year,
year,
they creep.
they
Third
creep.
year,
Third year, they leap. And I thought that was a bunch of BS, but whoa, that is so true.
yeah.
So
So
true.
what about the lotus seeds? So when is the best time to plant lotus seeds for next year? Do you plant them now in the fall, or do you wait until spring?
I have no clue. So are there anybody?
Diane tells me spring.
Diane said
Diane.
spring. I'd go with that. I go
Yeah,
with the word of
Diane's
Diane.
had amazing luck with
Okay.
lotus, and she's done it in the spring. But
What
she scratches the seeds.
So
And what
that's also
about-
called scarifying. And when she says
Yeah.
scratch, like get a freaking knife and dig into the little turd.
Yeah,
And
or heavy
about-
sand.
What about iris seeds?
I plant them now.
And so I have another question about them. Should
So actually,
iris
that's-
seeds
irises-
dry out before you plant them, or should they be fresh when you plant them?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
If you've got iris seeds, you've been blessed. Iris, fall is the best time to move a plant or to divide a plant and move it. And if you do cut back those leaves to a shorted inverted V, a kind of a, one leaf coming down and the other coming down the other direction. But if you're talking seeds from an iris,
That's right.
plant them here in the fall. It doesn't matter if they've dried. Just when you find the seeds, take them, and don't plant them deep. Just
Yeah.
push them down into the soil to about where your finger comes level with the soil. Don't try and really bury them. And
What do you mean your finger comes level with the soil, Rebecca?
So if
That
you
quarter inch.
if you have a finger, that you've got the seed on, push it in, but push it to where you're not creating a hollow for the seed to go into. Plant it where the seed is level with the soil. Your finger is level as you push on it.
Like not even, don't even barely cover it, is what she's saying.
No, I don't even cover mine. I just push them
Right.
till they're kind of stuck into the soil. I don't cover them.
Yeah.
And how much do you
not
water
as
'em?
deep as I'm pushing fertilizer into the lilies.
Yeah.
No.
No, actually not as much as you're putting fertilizer into the lilies, or at least
Okay.
not. I cover my fertilizer because otherwise the water washes them off. But
I got them. I got you.
just literally, I mean, if you can still see the top of the seed, that's okay.
Because that's how the rhizomes live. The rhizomes are just barely under the surface at all. And when Rebecca was out at my house gathering iris a few months ago, we noticed, and subsequently we noticed, that a lot of my land-based iris, which have never had seed pods, I had a bunch of seed pods this year. Not
Is-
water iris, but land iris.
Which
This
I
year
had
has
never
been
before.
completely cuckoo.
Yeah, it's cuckoo.
This year was amazing for iris as far as seeding and multiplying and everything like that. They really did great. Like Lori said, even things that we had never seen seed before did. Water iris, I'm used to seeing seed. but not land iris. But I saw at Lori's and my own, both had seeds this year.
And
But
I've already got babies from the seeds, you know, because normally the babies, the daughters come on the mother plant, but I have babies coming up that must have come up from the seed. So it's crazy times.
yeah, this was a great, great year for iris.
All right, let's talk about cutting back or not cutting back.
Yeah, so if any of you listened to Judy Ashner a few months ago when she talked about some of the native plant tendencies, our folks who do any of the beneficial insect stuff will tell you not to cut back. Those dead leaves, those
So
dead,
don't, in other words, in layman's, you know, some of us are like anxious to just go hibernate, Netflix and chill. So we want to take care of the garden and we want to like tidy it up.
Do
That's
not
what
tidy.
Judy is saying, don't do that.
Do not tidy. That's where
Don't
all the
tidy.
winter in there. They
Like you don't tidy until like February, March, or April.
when the temperature starts to raise, then I tidy.
Yeah,
yeah.
got it.
Although, you know, I'll say there are certain things that will do better if you cut them back now. And that's some of those things I just learned that this past year. Things like Esperanza that is borderline here, whether it will come back or not. If you cut some of those borderline plants back here in the fall and then mulch over them, they are more likely to come back for you.
What do you mean borderline, Rebecca?
I take Esperanza as the best example. It barely overwinters here.
Gotcha.
It will, but it's not extremely happy about it. And
So if
don't-
you have more foliage exposed to the cold, it's going to
it
be
seems
less
to not do
successful.
as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Like I have
So-
these huge hostas, and when their leaves die, it's like a bunch of stuff. So I usually pick up those big leaves, but I don't pick up the leaf litter that might be under them.
But hostas like the cold, so I don't worry about them so much. It's the things like Esperanza that if you don't cut them back and you leave something above the surface to freeze, it like I don't know. This may be completely a wrong analogy, but it seems like it sucks that cold down.
I
into
get
the
it.
root.
It like shocks the rest of the plant down to the bone.
It
Like
does.
like when I
does.
get cold to the bone, like
Exactly. Whereas if I
please
cut
just
it off,
bury me.
yeah, if I cut it off at ground level and mulch over it, it happily comes back in the spring, even after Snowmageddon and all those. But the ones where we
It may
didn't
even
cut it
come back prematurely and be a problem, but at least it comes back.
yeah, but where I've cut it back, it seems to come back stronger the next year.
But you
Gotcha.
also know, before we're going to have something like that again, you just need to water the heck out of all of those areas, because if
Oh,
the plant is
absolutely.
wated, it's
It
got a
won't
better
work.
chance of living through that than if it's not watered.
That is absolutely 100% the case. I learned that from my father, who was chairman of the Department of Agriculture. The best thing you can do ahead of a freeze is water like heck.
And then cover all your faucets.
Nicely put.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
PC'ly put. All right. How about fall planting, Rebecca? We're like 10 of 9.
Yeah. So, you know, this is a good time to do things like spread some of those things like zinnia seeds. And I find if I go ahead and plant my seeds for my things like cannas and things like that have seeded in the fall, if I go ahead and move those seeds to somewhere else that I want them to be next year, they tend to come up better. And I don't know if that's because the cold hardens them, cracks them, whatever they do, but they come up better than if I gather the seeds, store them inside over the winter, and then put them back out.
That's also the time to move anything that you're planning to move in your yard. If you want to move a plant from one spot to the next.
Absolutely. And
Good
the
point.
bigger,
Good point.
the
So,
deeper the roots
if y'all want to
are,
move anything over to my house, get about it.
What's that?
yeah. So, and I just want to, you know, things like iris and stuff, iris, any of those, it's best to do it in the fall. Trees, best move between October and March.
You know what, Rebecca, I would say, the only time to do it,
Yes.
you know, like
Yeah,
if
yeah,
somebody
but
was
then
looking for my recommendation, I would say only. Not that it might not survive. And I worked for a builder for like a bazillion flipping years, and we
Yeah.
planted trees all the
Any-
time. But I tell you, anytime we planted trees or grass or shrubs or any of that stuff, even with full irrigation systems, they replaced all that crap. If it
Right.
wasn't between October and March.
And with our
Yeah.
Texas heat, plants and especially trees and bushes just don't even have a chance if they're not planted
I-
before
that-
January.
That's just not fair.
Right.
And you know what?
Yeah.
The opposite is true for, oh, I'm gonna shut down my pond and I need to rehome all my fish. We don't do the rehoming of the fish during the spring crazy time, and we don't do it during the winter when they're hibernating. Like you're like
Right.
poking a bear and going, hey, wake up, honey. I'm gonna move you over here into this different climatic experience in this different environment. We don't do that. So you guys don't see a whole lot of rescue stuff going on in the winter, and that's because our North Texas Water Garden Society pond guy has like cut them off at the pass when they've like submitted that kind of stuff, and he's like, oh man, we just really don't recommend this at this time of year because it's not fair to the fish. It just
Yeah.
anyway, sorry.
Much
So
better.
yeah.
If
So
you
we're-
move, if you move an iris right now, it might bloom in the spring. But if you move an iris at a different time of year, you're gonna miss
It
1
won't.
year of a bloom. It'll take 2
Exactly.
years for it to
Yeah.
bloom. So that's just the way it is.
But if you move a fish in
Actually, if you move
December,
it
it's gonna
right now-
die. So
Yeah. And if you move it now and fertilize it, you're going to get beautiful blooms in the
Yeah.
spring.
yeah.
So
Cut
one of the other
roses.
fun ones here, just as we get ready to kind of end here this evening,
Let's
Is
go ahead and talk
roses.
about roses, Rebecca, before we go out.
roses. And I say cut
And
them back on-
separate that between like, easy roses and hard roses.
doesn't matter. Any of your roses, trim them back on Valentine's Day or as close to it as you can.
How far?
I mean, a week or two either direction.
No. I mean,
up
how
to a
far am I
third.
gonna cut that sucker?
Up to a
Oh,
third.
well, okay, so that's, yeah, there's a whole art to pruning roses, and we
Yeah.
can't probably go into all of it here, but yes, up to 2/3 of their growth length is fine, but
So,
the time
so,
to do it,
so, like, not popular with crepe people, crepe murder, but with roses,
no,
we're
crepe
gonna
murder.
rose murder them. Like, we are gonna
Yeah.
cut them back,
yes, they can be cut back.
but they're gonna
almost
be
in-
so happy when you do
Yes.
that.
But that's one of the few that I would say don't do in the fall or after their sap has gone down. they're best done in the spring, right before the sap starts to rise. And I take that from my grandmother, who had amazing rose gardens. And she always said, you know, it's Valentine's Day that you think about roses. That's when you give roses, and that's when you tend to your roses. And she would cut the heck out of her roses at Valentine's Day. And she had the most beautiful rose garden of any individual I've ever known.
I think that works for almost all of them, Rebecca. I think the exceptions would be the little carpet roses or the little dwarf, the drift roses. Those, maybe even those,
And when do you do those, Lisa?
after a big bloom, like when all those blooms are like spent, just like knock them off, just like you would.
Well, those
any
are
kind-
that's deadheading.
you
and
would
that's-
any perennial. You're like cleaning them up.
Yeah, but that's deadheading. That's different than cutting back. You should deadhead any rose that doesn't naturally deadhead itself.
So
Throughout
that's a
the
good
season.
point to make. So deadheading is different than blasting.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking if you want to trim it back to a shape. If you want to
Gotcha.
level them out, you know, I'm looking at the deck behind my deck where I have a bunch of roses, and my son and his future bride are talking about a wedding in my yard next summer.
Oh, you
Yeah.
better get about it, sister.
Yeah, oh yeah. Scary, but you know, we're talking about the fact that we don't want the roses up and over the deck. And it's like, okay, so I got to cut them back to a foot tall next spring, next Valentine's Day, so that they'll be a beautiful, consistent height next summer. Cutting them back now helps, but it's not near as good for the roses as cutting them back. They're in the very, very, very early spring.
Make sure your clippers are clean, especially if anyone else has used them, because that's how this rosette stuff spreads.
Absolutely, and that's
Great
true.
point, Lori.
anytime.
Hey, I vote you don't loan your lawn tools to.
Yes, but even Lori has a good point. You should even sterilize them between your own plants.
Absolutely. If you have a plant, especially like absolutely sterilize them in between. But if you have a known plant, absolutely sterilize.
Yeah.
And how would you do that?
I wipe mine down with alcohol.
Good point.
Yep.
Any other
Alcohol
techniques?
with Clorox. A
So Clorox, we also use that to do the sanitizing of the big koi show ponds, show tanks. It's a special Clorox, but
Rebecca, do you make a Clorox and water solution and dip your clippers in there, or what do you do?
I basically make it up in a bucket about 50-50, and then I use a rag, and then I, you know, dip it in the water and wipe them down. And then I don't put the white rag back in the bucket until I've rinsed it out.
Yeah.
kind of a COVID protocol.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, very much.